For ambitious dads caught between work and home, this is where you find your footing. Here's your host, Jeff Hittner.
Welcome to the Ambitious Dads Podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Hittner. After more than 200 conversations with fathers, I realized we're just not talking enough. Not about our fears, our ambitions, how our kids are really doing, or how we're holding up in the middle of it all. This podcast is for the dads trying to build something meaningful and be present at home. The ones carrying a lot, questioning if they're doing enough, and craving honest conversations without the filters. If that's you, you're not alone. You're in the right place. Let's figure this out together. Today's guest, we have Larry Hagner. Larry is the founder of The Dad Edge. He is a coach to dads, no surprise. He is an author as well on the topic of fatherhood, and the host of the Dad Edge podcast. And most importantly, he is a father to four boys. So Larry, it's an absolute pleasure to have you join us.
Jeff, what's going on, man? Thank you so much for having me. This is cool, man. Thank you. And by the way, greetings in Spain. That's pretty cool, dude.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. So why don't you tell me a little bit about your story? I think that'll serve a lot of the fathers that we both aim to impact. Kind of tell us your story about your childhood and your relationship with your dad and how that's impacted you as the father that you are today. I think that would draw a lot of important insights and motivation for our listeners.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. My story is a little weird, it's a little different for sure. It's got a lot of twists and turns. My mom and bio dad, they were married in 1971. They were pretty young. I think they were like 21 when they got married. And then they had me in 1975. So I'll be 51 here in a month. And after they were married for 4 years and I was born after like 9 months, I think I was 9 months old. They went through a really bad divorce, like really, really bad divorce. And my dad completely left. And I think the feeling was kind of mutual. I don't think like he did necessarily abandon me, but like I think that he was not a part of my life. And oddly enough, when I was 4 or 5 years old, that's when kind of the audio video sort of turns on. You kind of have memories. And I remember being in like kindergarten or preschool, something like that. And I remember dads coming to pick my friends up. And I knew what a dad was because my friends had dads, but like I didn't have a dad. But like back then, like it was cartoons. Like you think like the stork like brings you to the porch. And, my impression was I thought moms go out and find dads. And I'll never forget the first time my mom actually brought a guy into our house. And, she told me one day, she's like, hey, I'm going to have a friend over for dinner tonight. It was like a Friday night. She's like, I'm going to have a friend over for dinner tonight. I work with him. He's a really special friend of mine. And I've known him for a little bit and I really want you to meet him. And I think that was her way of saying like, hey, I've been dating somebody in the workplace and time for you to awkwardly meet him. But I remember when this guy walked in my house, man, like he was wearing a 3-piece suit. He was a white collar data software engineer for a company called Citi back in the day. And like, I remember like just looking at him when he walked through the door. He was wearing like a trench coat. It was cold outside. He had a briefcase, like a handlebar mustache. It's like 1980. And I remember like saying to myself, I was like, that is a dad. Like, that's a dad. Like that's what they look like. And my mom introduced me to him. And literally the first words that this dude heard coming out of my mouth was, are you going to be my dad? As I'm like looking up at him, shaking his hand, like beaming. And my mom like gasped and like, he just like awkwardly laughed. But I mean, like, I think my mom kind of took that as like a Jerry Maguire moment, where like the little kid goes up and hugs Jerry and she's like, oh my gosh, I got to marry this guy. My kid loves him. And my mom married him like 6 months later. And the first year was like super cool. I was like, I remember my mom quitting her job and she stayed home with me and my dad worked a lot. But like after the first year, things got really horrific. So like he drank a lot. My mom drank a lot. There was a lot of fighting. There was a lot of abuse. My dad like physically abused me and he also adopted me too. So like my last name is actually his and it was really bad. I mean, I remember cops being called to my house because the neighbors heard them fighting or heard, and it was bad, really bad. And then when I was 10, they got divorced and I've never seen the guy since. I actually found out about 15 years ago he died. And, it was really, really odd because I remember feeling relieved that he left, but also feeling like, now what, but at that point, like I understood what the birds and the bees was. And I went to my mom and I was like, hey, who's my dad? Like, I know he wasn't it. Like, who's my dad? And that's, my mom told me, she was like, I was actually married before. And I was like, I had no idea. I was like, what? And she's like, yeah. She's like, I was like, where is he? What's his name? And I knew his name. And she showed me like wedding album pictures. And I was like, well, where is he? Where does he live? She's like, I have no idea. And I don't know if that was true or not, but she's like, I don't know where he lives. He's not around. So a couple years pass by. I'm 12. I go up to the local YMCA to go play basketball with one of my friends. And like I said, I knew my dad's name. That was it. And it was a really unique name, Larry Boyd. I mean, there's not many people I think name that. And so I'm waiting to get my basketball from this clerk, and this clerk like looks over and he sees this woman coming in. He's like, oh, here comes Mrs. Boyd with the hockey payment. And I was like, so turns out my dad played hockey up there, like on a rec league. And so I looked at the guy and I was like, did you say Boyd? And he said, yeah. And I go, hockey payment? What do you mean? He goes, oh, her husband plays hockey up here. And I was like, what's her husband's name? I was like a really curious 12-year-old. And he's like, Larry. And I was like, oh my God. So I look at my friend and I kind of like go over to my friend. I was like, dude, we're going to wait for this lady to come in. And he's like, why? I was like, I think she's married to my dad. And he's like, what? And so like she makes the hockey payment. I go up to her, tap her on the shoulder. And I was like, hey, excuse me. And she like turns around really puzzled. And she's like, yeah, can I help you? And I said, hey, what's your name? She looks at me like I have two heads. She's like, Lisa, why? And I go, are you married to a guy named Larry? And she's like, yes. And I just looked straight at her and I said, I think you might be married to my dad. And then you just saw the look on her face. She knew exactly who I was. And she's like, oh my gosh. She goes, sweetheart, are you Larry? I said, yeah. And I'm just like beaming. I'm like, yeah. And she's like, yeah. She's like, sweetheart, I am married to your dad. I know exactly who you are. She goes, she was so kind. She's like, would you like to talk to your dad? I was like, I would love to talk to my dad. And she's like, follow me. So she goes around the corner, payphone. It's 1987. And she calls home and she's like, hey, I'm up here at the YMCA. I just made the hockey payment. I just ran into your 12-year-old son. He'd like to talk to you. And just hands the phone right over. And she did this in a very respectful, like loving way. And I started talking to him. I don't remember what we said, but he was just like blown out of the water. He was like, we started talking. He's like, oh my gosh, like, where do you live? Like, how's your life? Like, what's going on? Like, where do you go to school? And then that turned into us meeting. And then I met him. And I remember that day like it was yesterday. Like, it was euphoric. We hung out all day. We played arcade games at this one place. We had lunch, and that turned into like the next 6 months. Like, I saw him every week. He only lived 3 miles from us. I had no idea. And he was married, had a 2-year-old son, another one on the way. And then after like 6 months, like just things started to really change, and I couldn't put my finger on it, and the best way I can describe it now that I'm an adult is like, think of a woman that you've dated in your life and she's not into you anymore. And a breakup is coming. She just hasn't said it out loud, but all the signs are kind of there. So I remember I was 12 calling my dad. I'm sitting on the edge of my bed. It's like a landline. And I'm like, is everything okay with us? Like, I feel like something's not right. And then I don't even remember the words that came out of that conversation, but that was the end of our relationship. And he left again. And I really went into a bad place, man. My mom continued to date like these really toxic men. That's all she dated was like these really toxic abusers, like drugs and alcohol. And like, it was just really bad. And I failed the 8th grade actually the very next year. Just kind of gave up on school, not because I wasn't smart enough, but because I was just like, whatever, I don't care anymore. We did 8th grade twice, went on to high school, went on to college, graduated college, met my college sweetheart there. Ended up doing fine in life, got my degree in sports med with a minor in nutrition. And then I went into medical device sales and I was making a great living. So fast forward till I'm 30 years old, married for 3 years, pregnant with our first son. I'm in a Starbucks for a business meeting. And who came walking in for his morning coffee? My dad. And I knew exactly who he was when he walked in. He didn't see me. I saw him. And then that serendipitous moment turned into what has now been 21 years of us having a relationship.
Oh, wow.
And that was the start, but that wasn't the full start of the dad edge. But that was my childhood. And after going through stuff like that, I was like, when I become a dad, I'm going to be a good dad, and when I get married, it's going to be once. But I'll tell you, the first 6 years I was a dad, and I'm happy to continue the story, but I'll pause. The first 6 years of me being a dad was not ideal. It was not good.
Yeah. First of all, thank you so much for sharing all of that. I really was visualizing and felt like I was there for that. And I would love to understand now that you're kind of moving into the story about your own experience as a father. Some of those wounds, how did they carry over into the early part of your parenting and fatherhood? And it's obvious that at least, not to ruin the story for everyone, but there's a happy ending. I mean, you're a fatherhood expert. So I'd like to kind of dive into some of the difficulty about kind of identifying your own challenges in your parenting and what brought you to, like, what gave you the self-awareness to recognize them, and that you needed to figure out how to solve for them, because I think that's where so many dads get stuck. So yeah, please continue the story.
Yeah. So I wish I could tell you I'm a fatherhood expert. I always say I'm a fatherhood student, because
Fair
I
enough.
that's why I do my podcast. Do I know a thing or two now more than I did 15 years ago? Sure. But, I still continue to learn. I mean, my oldest is 20 and, every day is like, I always tell him, I'm like, today you're 20 years old, 3 months and 1 day. And this is my first day raising a 20-year-old, 3 months and 1 day. And tomorrow will be my first day raising a 20-year-old who's 3 months and 2 days. So it's like, always learning, always evolving. These conversations, these relationships, they're always changing. And you got to change with them. But to answer your question, I wasn't an abuser or anything like that when I was married. I made 3 promises to myself when I got married. I was like, I'm going to be married once, and I'm going to be a good husband. When I become a dad, I'm going to be a good dad. And the other thing I'm going to do is I'm never going to strike my children out of anger, because I was beaten up a lot as a kid from these father figures. And some guys my mom was married to, and other guys they were dated, and they were horrible, horrible men. And, but I was the typical guy, I think, that was in the drift. And I talk about that in the book that I just wrote last September called The Pursuit of Legendary Fatherhood, where, every day was the wash, rinse, repeat. On paper, everything looked pretty good. I was making good money, but I really wasn't. I was physically there, but mentally and emotionally, I didn't have any skills to really be patient. Like, I really struggled with patience. I didn't. I was a terrible communicator with my wife. I just could not figure that out on how to communicate with her. I was an avoidant guy, so when things go bad, I would just avoid things. I was also a nice guy, where I would do everything my wife wanted, but then resent her, and then it caused so much tension between us. And then the day that the dad edge got started, my oldest was 6 and my youngest at the time was 4. He's now 18.
Mm.
And breaking that last rule of never hitting my kids out of anger. So like, the dad edge got started with a really dark moment. And my 4-year-old, we were getting ready to move. And so I'm packing up my kids' playroom and we're getting ready to move. And I hate moving. On top of that, and when I was in medical device sales, I lost my biggest customer that day to one of my competitors that made up 60% of my territory and about 80% of my income. So I was like, we're moving. My wife's a stay-at-home mom. I just lost my number one customer. I might get fired. Like, I was in a really bad headspace. And I'm packing up my kids' playroom and did it for like 3 hours, like all these toys and in boxes and stuff. And then my 4-year-old, who's 18 now, comes downstairs, and I was about ready to take a break. And I looked at him, and this is ridiculous now that I even think about it. I'm like, hey man, Dad's going to take a 30-minute break. I was like, I'm going to go get something to eat. I was like, I have these toys over here for you to play with. They're out of the boxes. Please don't pull anything out of the boxes. And I'm sitting here, I think about that, and I was like, that is just ridiculous. It's like telling somebody who's on a 21-day fast to go to a buffet and not eat. And what does my kid do? Like, I come downstairs 30 minutes later, and everything that I'd packed up was just scattered all over the place. And I just hit a rage. And I turned him around, and I just, in a moment's notice, and just swatted him on the butt. And I spanked him. But unfortunately, I hit him so hard that he lost his footing and he fell. And luckily the floor was carpeted, so he didn't get hurt, but it scared the bejesus out of him. And then immediately when I did it, I was like, oh my God, what did I do? Like, literally, I was like freaking devastated with shame out of my mind. And I immediately went to go pick him up. And as he turned over and he saw me coming like this to pick him up, he literally like gasped and like closed his eyes and put his hands up like, please don't hurt me. And on the back of my book, The Pursuit of Legendary Fatherhood, the first sentence is, many years ago, I became the monster that I swore to protect my kids against. And the guy who is my, the publishing agency was like, you cannot put that on the back of a book. And I'm like, well, I'm going to. I was like, because I'm all about the truth. And that's exactly what happened. And it was in that moment, I picked him up, gave him a bath, put him to bed, went to my office, and I was like, I got to figure this out. I am just have no clue what to do. And I started looking at my life. And at the time I was, I got my degree in sports med, knew everything about the body, knew everything about physical fitness, nutrition, all that. I was doing martial arts for about 13 years. I knew a little bit about that, obviously. And I started looking at like those areas. I'm like, why am I okay in these areas? Like, why do I know what to do? And it's because, well, I've been taught or I've learned. And what have I done with fatherhood? I've winged it. What have I done with marriage? I've winged it. Like I have no skills whatsoever. And I thought to myself, could the rules be the same? Could you actually learn how to do these things? And that has now turned into, ever since the past 15 years, that was in 2011, the past 15 years have been exactly that. It's just been learning. And then launched my podcast 11 years ago. I've written now 6 books on the topic. But yeah, and I still just continue to learn and learn and learn. But yeah, that's how Dad Edge got started.
Wow. Thank you for sharing such another really vulnerable moment. I think one of the word that you brought up that's really powerful and difficult word for a lot of us as dads is shame, right? So, how did you move from that being like the start of a really bad shame cycle to I don't think you're, at least in what you just said, you didn't give yourself enough credit to say like, this isn't how I want to be in this world as a husband, as a dad, and I'm going to figure out how to change this. Like, what was it that helped move you in that direction? It couldn't have been purely a couple of days of introspection. Like, what was it that really kind of helped you start to dive into that learning, dive into that change?
So that night that the Dad Edge got started, it started as a Facebook page. And I knew nothing about blogging, knew nothing about podcasting. That wasn't even on my radar in 2011. When I went into my office that night after I spanked my kid, I always say this. I was like, when you're ashamed of something or you don't want to think about something, what do people do? Excuse me. They go on social media and they just scroll, right? And that's what I was doing. It's like, oh, let me go look at everybody else's great life. My life sucks. And like, it's like, let me look, oh, Susie got a new car. Oh, Brad got, he's got a new kid. And like, oh, that's awesome. But I saw this button in the left-hand corner that said create a page. And I'm a really big faith-based person. And I don't think I was alone in my office that night. I think that there was a spiritual nudge, and I clicked that button. I don't know what it is that was in me. I just clicked it and it said, what do you want to name your page? And the words, The Good Dad Project, just rolled off my heart and onto that keyboard. But I don't know if a lot of people know this, but I was the project. It wasn't supposed to be anything besides, the only thing I was creating was, I was like, if I go out and maybe learn something new every day, and I just put it here, like just for my own journal, kind of like my own public accountability. I never did it for followers or anything like that. I just did it on my own. And then I started just researching things about like communication and marriage dynamics and what does a woman need and what do your kids need and how do you create, environments of psychological safety and like all this and the whole idea of shame and guilt and all this other stuff that we feel. I started just talking about it just typing it out on this page. And I'll never forget this. That went on for about a year, and I was contacted by this huge church here locally, by this moms group. And this woman reached out to me. She's like, hey, we're looking for a speaker, for this month. And we really want you to come out and speak. And I'm like, speak on what? And she's like, on how to be a good dad. I was like, you got the wrong guy. I was like, I am not a good dad. And she goes, no. Like, you're so authentic and so transparent, like almost to your demise. And like, that's actually what we kind of like love about you. And I was like, okay, well, how many women are we talking to? Because it was a mom's group. She's like, oh, we're the biggest in St. Louis. We have 350. And I'm like, 350 moms? Are you serious? She's like, yeah. And we'd love for you to come out and speak. I was like, I don't even know what to speak on. I really don't. And she goes, just come and speak from your heart. And I'm like, okay. So I did that and they absolutely loved it. And I didn't really have much prepared. I just shared stories and what I was learning. And then I was like, maybe there's something here. And then I launched a year later the blog in 2013. And then 2015, I got really tired of writing and I just wanted to talk to people. So then I started the podcast. And the more I started to answer your question, the more I started to podcast on these topics that we deal with, like shame and guilt and hiding in the shadows and trying to figure it out on your own and trying to white knuckle everything. The more and more it became apparent that I was not alone, that every single guy actually felt exactly like how I did, but we weren't having conversations about it. And then in 2017, I decided to start a group, and I was like, and I literally called 10 people and I'm like, hey, I'm starting this group. I was like, we're all just going to learn from each other. Like, I'm not going to necessarily coach you, but we're all going to learn from each other. And here's what it's going to look like. And all of them said yes. And, and after 3 months, cause I only had a 3-month program, they're like, well, now what do we do? I was like, I don't know, leave. I was like, I don't have anything else. And they're like, what if we just do it all again? And we just keep going. I was like, I guess we could do that. And then that went on for a year. And then I was like, well, maybe there's something more here. And then that year in 2017, I started what is now the Alliance, where we have several hundred men who do life with us on the daily. But yeah, and we all, I'll share this last thing because it came from a client. Shame dies when you share things on your heart in safe spaces. And I was like, whoa, right? So if we're talking about shame, shame dies when you talk about things in safe spaces. And that's exactly what I think men need.
Thank you for sharing that. Why do you think it's easier for your wife or a woman in general to do that research, do that questioning about how to communicate well, how to parent well, and for us as dads, it is not something that seems like the first thing that we think to do?
It's really odd to me. Odd to me now that I understand it. When I was on the other side of that, I remember when my wife would be like, hey, we should go to counseling. This was like early on in our marriage. And I was like, no, we don't go to counseling. Then something's wrong. And there were things wrong, but I was like, they're not wrong enough yet.
Yeah.
Right. Which is the total opposite. I mean, we don't do that with our cars, with oil changes. We don't do that with our teeth. We don't wait till our teeth start to rot out before we go to the dentist, but we do that in our relationships with our wives and kids. But I think men are told, like, white knuckle it, put your head down, just get through it. Also, if you need help with anything, you're weak, you're less than, it's like, but the funny thing is we, if you think about like a trade school for an electrician, like an electrician can never be an electrician unless he goes to trade school. And then he's got to become an apprentice for like a few years. And then he becomes a journeyman after that. Like, we need a driver's license and a test to drive our cars, right? You need a license to go catch a fish or hunt a deer, but you don't need any help being a dad and a husband, or you don't need any type of learning skills. Like I now I think, like, I look at the logic of that now and I'm like, that is absolutely the opposite of what we should be doing. But I'll tell you, like 15 years ago, I was the guy telling you, like, yeah, we don't need that.
And I mean, I see that all the time too. And it's really a frustrating and vicious cycle where so many of the dads that I speak to, they believe this false premise that you're either a good dad or you're not, right? That there's no like upskilling, there's no training, there's no learning involved. Do you think that's just coming from like the culture of our experience with our fathers, from what we're seeing in it kind of in our own environment, and how do you propose we sort of approach it differently?
I think it's a mixture of our childhood. Yeah. I mean, because our blueprint, like most of the guys that I've had on the podcast, most of the guys who are my clients, I would say came from either an average or less than average experience with their own dad growing up or parents. And I have met obviously some men who come from good experiences too. Like, and they, but the thing is that I used to think this, and I think a lot of people think this, the story that we tell ourselves will be our life. So I used to tell my wife this all the time. She would be like, she's like, you have no idea how to communicate with me. And I would tell her, well, right, because I didn't grow up learning how to do it. So I'm not a good communicator. Like, I would literally identify as that, right? Our words have power and our words create worlds. So it's like, I would even tell myself, well, I can't be patient with my kids. I never learned how because I never had a dude who was patient with me. So I'm never going to be patient. Like, I would actually say that to myself. Sometimes I'd say it out loud to my wife. And, I think it's number one, yes, it's our childhood experience. Number two, it is the narrative that that we're speaking into our own mind and heart where no one else can hear. On top of it, most men, 70% of men report having feelings of loneliness. I think it's 82% of men don't have a 3 a.m. friend. As we get older, friendships are easy in grade school, high school, and college. But after that, men get really rusty with our relationships. Most of our relationships are very shallow. We go out, we drink a beer, we watch the UFC fight, and we answer every question with good, fine, or busy. Very rarely do men have conversations or know how to have conversations with other dudes of like, hey man, like, how are you and Jessica doing? How's your communication? How's your intimacy? How's your parenting alignment? What are the conversations like between you two? Like, how's your faith doing? Like, how's your sleep and your mindset? Like, how's that? Like literally getting into those and not letting a guy off the hook be like, we're fine. Well, tell me more about that. What's fine? What's not fine? What's good and what's not so good? It's like men actually, what I've experienced is men really want to have these conversations. They really, really do. But they don't want to be the first one to bring it up, right? Because that's another thing too. We don't know how to bring it up because we think, well, if I bring it up, am I being weak? Like, this guy's going to find out that I don't have a great marriage. This guy's going to find out that I don't have my finances in order. He's going to find out that I'm not a patient dad if I bring this up. So like, there's that ego that wants to protect us so much. But Ryan Holiday wrote the book, The Ego is the Enemy. It's that ego actually keeps us from all the things that we truly, truly want.
Can you tell us like part 2 of that story with your 4-year-old? I mean, at that time, for instance, did you know how to repair? Did you have no?
No.
And how did that shift over the years of writing the blog and talking to other dads? And now you've got 4 boys of varying ages, right? So how do you approach it differently now? How do you approach those feelings now, whether it's rage or frustration or when you make mistakes or shame? Like, what are the different things that you've come to sort of learn and grow into over the last 15 years?
So to answer your question, did I ever repair with my 4-year-old son? Yeah. I mean, he and I are all my boys and I were very, very close. They also have a really good,
by the way.
What's that?
Does he remember that experience?
He does.
Yeah.
He doesn't remember, but he's heard the story probably 1,000 times. He's been in the audience when I've spoken about it. I'll actually never forget in the first time I spoke about it publicly. We were at what was called the Dad Edge Summit in 2018. This was our annual retreat. We had several hundred guys in the audience, and my son was there. And at the time, he was 8. And I'll never forget this. I'm sorry, no, wait, in 2018. No, he's 10. He was 10 years old. It was the first time he heard me tell the story, and he was in the front row, and I'll never forget it. And I broke down telling the story. In fact, it's even still to this day, it's hard for me to like not get emotional telling the story because I see his face, and that's what it kind of haunts me, to be really honest with you. And I told the story, and right in the middle of my speaking, he just got up and walked right up on stage, and I was like, what is he doing? And he looked at me. I was like, what are you doing? And he looked at me, he goes, I forgive you. And I was like, what? And he's like, I forgive you. And I'm like, I was blown away. And then I knelt down and I gave him this hug. And it was probably one of the coolest moments I've ever experienced with him. I mean, I've experienced a lot of cool moments with him, but like that was like really reparative.
Wow.
Because I think he probably knew, and still to this day, there's a part of me that I've had a hard time forgiving myself for that. But to answer your question, over the years, I've gotten the opportunity to learn so many skills through my own research, through interviewing so many amazing guests, through 2 different coaching certifications that I have on relationships and emotional IQ, is that I think one of the most powerful things we can do is be humble with our kids and be really human and real with our kids. So like, I'll be honest with you, Jeff, there isn't a day that goes by that I don't screw up, but like I do apologize for those screw ups. And one thing I've noticed about that, the fruit that's come out of that, is that I have kids that when there's wrongdoing done, like I just got a text from my 12-year-old where he did something wrong. And I was like, hey, you did this, blah, blah, blah. And his response really, really is inspiring to me. And I've seen all my kids do this. No excuses. I'm sorry. It won't happen again. Here's what I'm doing to fix it. And I'm like, a 12-year-old doesn't talk like this. And I showed my wife that, and she's like, but that's how you apologize. That's how you've always apologized for like over a decade to these kids. I've seen it tons of times. And I was like, man, she's like, so there's something to be said about you being humble. Like it teaches them to be humble. And I was like, man, I guess maybe there's some truth that I wasn't trying to do that on purpose, but I think it's something that they've picked up, but it's showing a very human side of their dad as well.
That's a beautiful story. What's the thing that's keeping you up at night right now as a dad?
Oh, that one's easy. So in 73 days, my 18-year-old leaves for University of Arkansas. And he's the first one to leave the nest. My oldest one is still here. He's going through paramedic training right now. He's going to be a firefighter, so he'll be here under our roof for probably another year or two. But the 18-year-old is the first one to leave the nest. He's also the one that I spanked, and we've got like just a super tight relationship. But yeah, just I'm trying to like literally capture every single moment that I can with him before he leaves.
Letting go is a word that I use a lot with dads that I talk with. And there's all sorts of letting go in the context of parenting, but this is going to be kind of one of the biggest ones, right? Is there a way in which you're preparing for it beyond embracing all of these moments right now? Like how are you sort of imagining this over the next 6 months, not just the next 90 days?
I'm actually reading a book right now called Surrender.
And I like that book. Yes.
Yeah, you probably know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
It was actually right here. But anyway, I'm reading this book right now on surrender. And what we resist will persist, and what we focus on will expand and grow. So the more I resist that change, the more I fight it. This is what I'm learning now. And again, student, right? Like the more I resist that change, the heavier it's going to be. The more I surrender to that change, the better it's going to be. So right now, I'm just surrendering to it. And I'm surrendering to like the moments that when I'm with him, that they're going to be what they're going to be. Also, I think it's really important to have, like a cadence. I told him, I was like, hey, I'd really like to do a camping trip with you, one in the fall and one in the spring, fall semester, spring semester. I'll come down to Arkansas. Arkansas is great for that kind of stuff. I was like, just a camping trip between me and you. Are you cool with that? He's like, yeah, he loves to camp. Like it's his jam. And camp and fish and all this stuff. He's like, yeah. And I was like, great. So it's always, I think, making sure that I'm entering his world and not necessarily mine. So like that is now that's the goalpost for me, is like, how do I enter into his world? And like, so he loves football games, right? So Razorbacks football games. So I'm like, hey, like I'd like to pick at least 4 or 5 football games where we come down and we visit you and watch the game and we hang out. And he's like, yeah, right. And it's like, it's really just entering into his world and being a part of his world now.
That's such a great nuanced point too. I've had some other guests and we've talked about this idea of our kids want to connect with us so much that they often will show interest in what we love. But how do we like get into their world, particularly with the stuff that we may not find very interesting that they love? With all of your kids, is that something very intentional that you kind of make an effort towards with each one, and how do you do that?
So a couple different ways. I've brought them into my world, so like as well, but I would say that's more like 30% versus 70% their world. So like I want them to learn certain things. Like I'm really big into martial arts. I love martial arts. I think that's important that people learn how to protect themselves against evil. All my kids know how to defend themselves, whether it's me teaching them or we take them somewhere. So fitness is a huge part of our entire family's life. My 10-year-old, I was sitting in the hot tub with him last night, just chatting with him. And he's like, I really, really want to work out with you, because he sees me work out with all the other boys. And I was like, well, you're kind of small. I was like, I can't take you to the gym yet. I was like, but what if we did this? What if we did a workout every Saturday morning just on the subdivision playground? Like we'll do some push-ups, we'll do some pull-ups, we'll run around the pond. And he like just lit up. He's like, I would love that. And it's really amazed me that all 4 of my boys have always really embraced fitness. So I bring them into those worlds. And then the last thing is faith. So really bringing them into the world of faith, but also being really curious about where they're at with their faith and just being that guiding light for them. So that's more the 30%. The 70% is I'll do whatever you want to do. And I'm not saying like, take you to the arcade, like I'll just spoil you right. What I'm saying is like, whatever you're interested in, we will do it. So like my 10-year-old is wanting to play hockey this year. I can't skate backwards to save my life. I wouldn't know what to do with a hockey stick except for like try to slap shot something. But I'm like, yeah, man, let's go to stick and puck. Like your old man can barely skate, but I'll go. Let's do it. Right. My 18-year-old, 2 years ago, he was like, I want to go hunting. And I've never hunted. I didn't grow up with a dad who hunted or anything like that. And I always told my kids, I was like, if I don't know how to do something, what I promise you is that we'll go learn it together. And so like we got our hunting license and we went hunting. He got his first deer 2 years ago. Like it was the most euphoric thing ever. So it's like, and my 20-year-old, he's really into music. I can't play music to save my life, but I'll practice guitar with him and have him teach me. Like there's nothing cooler than that. Be like, hey, can you teach me something? Mm-hmm. And then you're entering their world and they just feel so on top of the world that they get to teach their old man something. So like I try to enter their world at that ratio, like 70% is their world, 30% it's mine.
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing that. When it comes to, since I have two boys, I remember early on when I was doing all my dad interviews, I kept asking like, I'm trying to raise these great boys and they fight all the time. Like I can't stop them from fighting. And I finally, asked enough dads that had boys for them to be like, this is 100% normal, right? So you've got 4 boys. That is a lot of boy energy. What have been some of the like challenges and tricks and to keep a mixture of, obviously, I'm sure there is roughhousing, but also like healthy and like happy play together. Like how do you just handle all that with so many boys in the house?
It actually has been shockingly easier than when I ever would have expected.
Yeah.
And I wish I knew why. Because I don't. Like, I have some theories. So, like, they have a really fantastic mom. They really do. Like, especially my 18-year-old. He is super tight with his mom, which I love. He's like, he was the center on the football team. Like he's a big burly, like. But the first thing he'd do when he'd come off that football field is hug his mom. So, like, I think they have a lot of respect for their mom, and their mom is she's a beautiful woman, but there's no princess in her. Like she is a rough and tumble, grew up on dirt bikes and dune buggies, and she's beautiful, but she also kind of kick your ass at the same time. Like if you piss her off enough, but she's never hit the boys or like anything like that. She's very gentle, but she's also very stern too. So, the boys have boundaries. One other thing that I think has really, really served us, and again, I think this is theory, but I think that this is also something really important because I see a lot of parents miss this. My wife and I have each other's back no matter what in front of the kids. If she throws down a decision on the boys' discipline and I don't agree with it, I'm not going to disagree with it in front of the kids. I'll go have that conversation with her in private and she'll do the same with me because the boys will never work me and her against each other ever, ever, ever. We've made that decision and we've even told them, like they'll look at me and be like, what do you think of what mom just said? I was like, you heard her. Mm-hmm. Like, I got her back. She's got mine. Whatever she says, I go with. Whatever I go with, she goes with. Like, you're not going to work us against each other. As far as like roughhousing and stuff like that, there's only been one time, actually 2 times, where I had to get in between my boys. One was my 18-year-old and 20-year-old, and they threw a couple punches, and I had to get between them, and that was squash. But in 20 years, that was the only fight I've ever seen them get into. One other altercation I saw was when my oldest got really, really pissed off at my 12-year-old. And this was like just a year ago. So my 12-year-old made a comment to my 20-year-old's girlfriend. He didn't realize he didn't realize what he was saying. But he asked her to go get a soda for him. And she got up and he said, good girl. And he was just being a goofball. Like, and then my 20-year-old was like, what did you just say? He's like, good girl. And he's like, you don't say that to her. And all of a sudden, like he grabbed him off the couch and like started slapping him on top of the head and like was pushing him, and it got rough. And I literally went up to my 20-year-old and I wrapped my arms around him. I was like, what are you doing? I was like, I don't care what he said. I was like, I understand. We'll talk about that. We'll settle this with our words. You are about 100 pounds bigger than him. And I was like, you will not put your hands on your brother like that. And like, I got like literally nose to nose, toes to toes. And my son like was like, okay, sorry. You know, like I also think a lot of it boils down to respect. And I also think it boils down to maybe some of the things we've said over and over and over again in this house, which is family first. You protect yourself and the people that you love. Somebody has given, if you see somebody trying to mess with your brother, you're the sheepdog. Like you go after that kid, right? You don't allow anybody to hurt our blood, period. I think that message has really landed with them. And plus, like, all my boys have seen the movie American Sniper, where where he talks about, you know, the sheep, the wolves and the sheepdog. And there's that one part where Chris Kyle protects his younger brother. And I've ingrained that in these kids. I was like, you will never be a wolf. God forbid I hear that you bullied somebody. Oh, there will be hellfire to pay under this house. Like, you do not do that. That's a wolf. However, you have every right to protect yourself and the people that you love. And that's what the sheepdog is. And I think my kids have taken a lot of pride in that. And I think that they've also maybe taken some pride in like, hey, we protect our own. And then I think maybe that's probably another reason they don't really beat each other up too much.
Is there some family rituals that are a big part of your life that maybe also kind of create this deeper connection and loving bond?
I think they're pretty simple, to be honest with you. I think we try to have dinner together every single night. You know, we have conversations around roses and thorns, you know, things that are tough, things that are good. It's crazy. My wife and I were just talking about this. She's like, do you realize like how much time we actually spend with our kids? She's like, we do everything with them. Like, we take them on every adventure, you know, I'm not talking about like Disney and that kind of thing, but she's like, we do everything as a family, like everything. She's like I took my two little guys to an arcade a couple weeks ago, and I asked my 20-year-old, who I would think, you know, you would think on paper he'd have no interest. I'm like, hey, I'm taking your little bros to main event. I was like, you have any interest in going? And he's like, yeah. I was like, you serious? He's like, yeah, of course. And he's always been like that. So is my 18-year-old. So it's like, I think they've had so much experience that we do so much together as a family, whether it's the simple stuff or the big stuff, that I think that that's created just tremendous bond for us.
I also wouldn't discount the fact that you have taught your kids with Rosebud Thorn at home how to talk about like the deeper issues and joys of what's going on in their life, right? I mean, how long has that been a constant at the dinner table?
That's been as long as I can remember. And even if it's not a roses and thorn like theme, like everyone still talks like that. You know, they talk about the good things that have happened that day or that week, what they're excited about, things that have been really, really tough. I also think my wife and I, because of doing this podcast and learning, we create environments of psychological safety. Mm-hmm. So we're always first to validate what it is that they're feeling versus fix it. You know, and then we're also really good, I think, and we've had to learn this, because you always want to fix your kids' problems, or you should do this, or you should do this, or why aren't you doing this, and why you should. It's more like getting really curious and asking them questions like, well, hey, what do you think about that? You know, or like, if you were to do that differently, what would you do different? You know, and that kind of thing. It's just really getting curious with them and having them do more of the talking versus us trying to pound a lecture or, you know, solve all their problems.
Yeah, I love it. Larry, thank you so much for sharing everything that you have, and in particular, your own really vulnerable story. I think it's going to serve all the dads that listen to us very, very well. So thank you for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Jeff. I really appreciate it, man.
My pleasure.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Ambitious Dads Podcast. If you enjoyed this conversation and want more insights on balancing ambition and fatherhood, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an upcoming episode. Check out the links in the description for our newsletter and more resources to help you live intentionally as a dad. See you in the next episode.